Well, hello, good evening. Welcome to another author event from the Norwich Bookstore. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name's Sam. If you are here in the Upper Valley, if you frequent our store, or if you're a frequent flyer in our events program, you might recognize me as that guy from the bookstore. And tonight I am delighted to be here with two authors I really admire. Franz Nicolay and Adam Wilson are here tonight to talk about their new books. And I am going to get out of the way in just a moment, but I have a couple of housekeeping announcements to make before we begin, and I hope you'll indulge me in that. The first one is about these books. Books are, of course, our business. They are what we are celebrating here tonight. And tonight we're talking about two wonderful recent novels. Someone Should Pay for Your Pain is the new novel from Franz Nicolay, and Sensation Machines, freshly out in paperback, from Adam Wilson. These two books are going to be available at the Norwich Bookstore. They are available online through us as well. I'm going to post links in the chat tonight to purchase these books. Now, art is work, writing is work, music and all forms of creation, they're hard work. And that work is supported by one thing and one thing only, and that is you purchasing and supporting that work. So that means book purchases. That is what keeps writers working. It is what keeps the doors of bookstores open. It is what keeps us able to do this. So don't be shy tonight if you love what you hear, and I expect that you will. Pick up a copy of Someone Should Pay for Your Pain. Pick up a copy of Sensation Machines. Pick up a few. The holidays are coming. We could ship these books anywhere in the country to you via USPS Media Mail, or if you're here in the Upper Valley of Vermont and New Hampshire, we can put these books aside for you at the store and you can come in and pick them up. We'd love to see you. Either way, we thank you for supporting these great authors, supporting independent presses, and supporting independent bookstores like ours. The Norwich Bookstore has been here since 1994, here on Main Street in Norwich, Vermont. We're about 5 minutes from the Dartmouth College campus. And if you're ever in the area, we hope you'll come and see us. We definitely would love to see you. Now, tonight, we're going to talk for probably about 45 minutes. We're going to do some reading. I'm really excited to hear what these two have to say. And then at the end of the evening, we're going to open it up to questions. So we always get great questions from this crowd. If you've got a question for Franz or for Adam, drop it in the Q&A box. That's at the bottom of your screen. You'll see it there. You can type your question in. We'll get to as many as we can at the end of the evening. Alternately, of course, you can also put questions into the chat on the side of your screen. Either way, we'll definitely get to as many as we have time for. So keep them coming. We always love to see your questions. Now, we do here at the Norwich Bookstore a variety of author events. We try to keep a pretty full schedule. We're going to take a break in December for the most part because things get wild, but we'll be starting right up again in January and all through 2022. So if you enjoy tonight's talk, you think you might want to come back and see something else that we've got going on, check us out. The norwichbookstore.com is our website. We are on social media at the Norwich Bookstore on most major platforms. And you can also sign up for our email newsletter and we'll let you know what else we got going on. We'd love to see you back here. Thank you again for joining us. Now, I am so happy to be here again with Franz and with Adam tonight. Two authors who I'm very excited to be introducing and to be hearing from. Franz Nicolay's writing has appeared in the New York Times, in Slate, in the Paris Review Daily, Kenyon Review Online, Los Angeles Review of Books, Plowshares, Three Penny Review, LitHub, Long Reads, and elsewhere. He has taught at the UC Berkeley and at Columbia University. He's currently a lecturer at Bard College. As a musician, he's known for his solo work as well as for his work with the Hold Steady and some other renowned bands over the past several years. His first book, The Humorless Ladies of Border Control, was named a season's best travel book by the New York Times. We'll drop a link in the chat to that book as well. His new book, his first novel, is Someone Should Pay for Your Pain, out now from Gibson House Press. And joining Franz tonight is Adam Wilson. Adam Wilson's the author of the short story collection, What's Important is Feeling, and the novel Flat Screen. His stories have appeared in the Paris Review, in Tin House, and in the Best American Short Stories, among other publications. Flat Screen was a National Jewish Book Award finalist and an Indie Next pick. The book has been translated into German and Italian. Wilson's taught in the creative writing programs at Columbia and at NYU. He lives in Brooklyn with his family, and his new book just out in paperback from Soho Press is Sensation Machines, a novel. Please, from wherever you're joining us tonight, join me in extending a warm welcome to Franz Nicolay and Adam Wilson.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sam.
All right, so I guess I'm going to read just a little bit first, and then Franz is going to read, and then we're going to chat. I'm going to read from a sort of early part of my novel. Just a little setup before I do, which is that this novel takes place in a near future, and near future New York, in which there's been another huge financial crash. And in this, amidst this crash, the Occupy movement has sort of become reinvigorated under the new moniker #Occupy, and there's a huge protest where we find ourselves at a huge protest, or just outside of a huge protest in downtown Manhattan, where the protesters are sort of protesting, trying to get a sort of universal basic income bill passed. And the narrator, my narrator, our protagonist, is he himself is a Wall Street banker who has lost all his money in the crash, and his wife's money, and all their money due to poor investments. And he hasn't yet told his wife, and he's sort of wandering around Manhattan trying to figure out what he's going to do and how to tell his wife. And he happens to find himself wandering through to this protest. So that's where it is. A few blocks away, outside Goldman Sachs, a smaller demonstration was at hand. A group of young people gathered around a card table holding signs with anti-Goldman slogans. Seated at the center, I was surprised to see, was Jay DeVore, founder of a social network and new media empire called Noose. Begun as an app for finding protests in the tri-state area, Noose had grown into a large-scale nonprofit with offices on both coasts, 200 full-time employees, print and online publishing arms, and a user base nearing the 2 million mark. Noose had been instrumental in spearheading #Occupy's organizational upgrade, in part by creating a manageable infrastructure for earmarking donations, and by implementing an online voting system that pushed the movement closer to its vision of a true direct democracy. DeVore, a baby-faced elder statesman among his Gen Z cohort, had become the de facto face of the movement after his public arrest during a reading of Melville's Bartleby the Scrivener. The reading stopped traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge, and DeVore appeared handcuffed on page 6, smiling for the cameras, part Robin Hood, part Zuckerberg, part Jewish JFK. DeVore and I were classmates at Columbia and had crossed paths at Brooklyn bars and mutual friends' birthday parties in the years since. Beyond his disgust at what I did for a living, I sensed a begrudging respect. I'd recently emailed DeVore with an article pitch for Noose's eponymous webzine of culture and politics. The piece was an unwritten excerpt from the book I was writing, or planning on writing, called Eminem: American in America. I had yet to receive a reply. DeVore, I said, and he looked up with the same soft eyes that had conjured the removal of so much women's wear, the sparkling tube tops and chic retro umbros of fangirls from Greenpoint to Red Hook and as far north as Washington Heights. He looked me over before responding, unsure about fraternizing with the enemy or else gauging the health risks of shaking my hand. Mixner, he said with a nod. We'd never made the transition to first names, which spoke to either a lack of intimacy or a deeper intimacy built of nostalgia. Don't worry, I said, I come in peace. If that's the case, DeVore said, and handed me a flyer. I had to remove the reading glasses from my bag to read it, and in doing so, grabbed a tube of moisturizer and passed it to DeVore. The sun had emerged from behind the clouds, and I figured DeVore, a pale guy like myself, might benefit from the product's SPF 15 infusion. For your face, I said. Devore rubbed the ointment into his cheeks in mechanical circles, like he'd practiced in a mirror after watching a YouTube seminar on the subject. In another life, he might have been me and I him. We were like the dual Lindsay Lohans in the remake of The Parent Trap, identical in nature, but nurtured to form separate systems of belief. I, with my working class upbringing, had come to value personal prosperity over fiscal equality, while Devore, descendant of Dayglow kibbutzniks, had learned that sharing led to caring, led to casual threesomes. My phone buzzed, but I ignored it and looked at what I'd been handed, an invitation to a, quote, funeral for capitalism at 8 p.m. in Union Square. Letterpress printed on creme cardstock. It was the second printed invite I'd received for an event that night. The other had come from a junior colleague, a cocky young trader raised in the crotch of Greenwich luxury, complete with a home bowling alley and servants cruelly uniformed in oversized bow ties. This colleague's life had been a procession of silver spoon achievement, prep school grade inflation, Harvard gut curriculum, and golf team heroics, genetically blessed Anglo-aquiline bone structure. And now at the first blush of failure, he was throwing a no-joke Great Gatsby theme party in the penthouse suite of Soho's Zone Hotel. The invitation, which sat in my briefcase, was similar to Devore's, except it was printed on a cheaper cardstock and in pedestrian Geneva font. Ricky had convinced me to make an appearance at the Gatsby party, promising top shelf bourbon and behavior that might provide anecdotal evidence for my theoretical book excerpt, a think piece on the way white investment bankers misappropriated rap lyrics as justification for fiscal Darwinism. I no longer wasted brain space wondering if I attended these events sincerely or ironically, the line between the two having been irreparably blurred sometime in the early aughts. My father once told me that everyone who lived through the 60s had his own personal ultimate, the day the idealism died. And I think one could claim an analogous moment for 90s kids, when each of us realized that Kurt Cobain was gone, complaints about selling out were nostalgic, and those adorable indie shops from Seattle were now the giants come to destroy. For many, this moment arrived with the post-haste corporatization of Cobain himself, his face become logo on t-shirts sold at Target so teens who'd never heard him could flash the style markers of disaffected rebellion while listening to the disco soul cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit from last week's The Voice. I liked hip hop, a genre stridently open about its impure relationship with commerce, and thought I was exempt from this kind of disillusion. I was wrong. I distinctly remember the first time I saw a photo of Vampire Weekend, Columbia kids who dressed in Brooks Brothers beach duds and played a prepified genus of Paul Simon world beat, and feeling surprised and disappointed that the boat shoe class had developed a claim on youth culture. It felt like a rigged game to bring power to the powerful, to deprive the less privileged of their monopoly on cool. Still, I look forward to the party. Maybe I could pregame at Devore's protest and pitch my book. There were sure to be plenty of editorial types on hand. My being a banker was of fetishistic interest, the protectors of the literary realm turning polite and deferential to anyone wearing a suit in a performance of open-mindedness that masked a deeper lust for proximity to dollars. What I couldn't do was go home. I'd been ignoring calls from Wendy since leaving the house, and it was only 9 a.m. I worried that she tried to use our visa and it had been declined. We were in bad shape, scratching bug bites, scaring at cell phones instead of each other. A heartfelt apology wouldn't cut it. I needed to offer, alongside my confession, a recovery plan. Not that I was so deluded as to think that a book deal might save me. AR gaming, VR porn, and the era of B/B+ quality TV had all but abolished the market for the kind of intellectually rigorous project I had in mind. There would be no angel at the funeral for capitalism handing out six-figure advances for hybrid works of cultural criticism and memoir. Still, if I could find a publisher, Wendy would understand how serious I was about this new vacation. And sure, we'd have to deal with our debt. I was working on that, but the important thing I would stress to Wendy was that I'd found a passion, a calling, and that this new pursuit would sustain my soul and would maybe eventually lead to my procuring a tenure-track gig at Pratt or the New School. Sounds like a good funeral, I said. Open bar. BYO, said DeVore. We may have power in numbers, but we're not particularly flush. He pointed to the donations bucket, which contained some coins, a $2 bill, and the butt of a sesame bagel. I wanted to prove my traitorous disregard for my industry, but not so badly that I was willing to part with the little cash I had. As a show of my sorry financial state, I flipped open my flap pockets. Out came a fistful of burrito scraps, pork nibs, green peppers, a wadded ball of aluminum foil. Calexico? La Esquina. Ah, he said, delicious. I'm glad we're agreed, I said. It's like that joke about Israelis and Palestinians and how they only agree on hummus. Maybe bankers and occupiers can be unified over burritos. DeVore produced a heartier laugh than my remark warranted. Did you get my email, I asked. I get a lot of emails. Did you get mine? Write the article, he said. We'll see if it's any good.
All right. I will follow that up, I think, with a view from the other side of cynicism, which is before my guy loses his idealistic enjoyment of the thing he does. Rudy Pauver at this point is a post-collegiate musician in a slightly fantastical form version of 90s Gainesville, where he has a band. A show day gleamed on the calendar. The anticipation was too pure to risk sullying, and the afterglow was to be savored. So he took off work the day of and the day after. Cass from the restaurant, Jules from the call center, Rudy from his job as the white face of the burrito shop, Seb from whatever it was Seb did all day. They half worked in the same way they'd half attended college. A mindless shift job was a blessing. The last thing they wanted was to leave work tired, their brain used up. Mere jobs weren't worth that. Rudy liked to walk the half hour from his house to the Prosper, a coffee shop by day, all ages venue by the occasional night. Seb and Cass would load the minivan they borrowed from her ex-boss, not that anarchist bookstores had bosses, and meet him there. The way was flat. The low, shallow houses played a losing game with the Spanish moss, palm, vines, and bamboo. The damp, vital rot, the cycle of life in one smell. Right turn along the brackish water, bordered by half-drowned scrub, of the bricked-in canal before it degraded into a glum brook. Past the Queen Anne gables and Victorian heaps, the sweeping oaks. Right on the main drag, the hacienda-tinted county library, tan with maroon highlights, a hexagonal tower topped by a smaller cupola with an ambitious steeple. A few blocks down, the drug court, then the squat, blocky tower of the Holiday Inn, abrasive and domineering. The Expat's first release was a brief disc, practically a demo, called Rough Magic. Mostly Seb's jubilant harangues, but two of Rudy's more melodic melancholiads as well. Cass designed the cover art, a scratchboard silhouette of a bird flying over a barbed wire fence. Unsubtle, but, Seb said, understatement has no place in propaganda. It became an unofficial logo. Some fans had photocopied stickers 4 to a page and slapped them on stop signs and bus benches around the city center. A small faux cobblestoned pedestrian plaza. At its center, between two benches, stood a stout pillar wrapped in advertising. Like the library, it was capped with a hexagonal onion dome and a skyward spire. A Morris column erected by some Francophile city commissioner with a pretense toward glamour. Embedded in the Capitol was a clock, hands stopped at noon or midnight. The shaft was quilted with posters, a community theater adaptation of A Star is Born. Students doing gypsy at the Performing Arts Center on campus. Get your tickets early for A Christmas Carol at the Hippodrome. Posters professionally pasted or feebly framed with puckered Scotch tape, shedding and flaking like a birch, exposing long gone faces, aged and torn. On a tree, the old rind frays away and lets the raw new bark breathe. Here, the new growth was impatient. There, just above eye level, curving away to the right, the woodcut migrant bird, his band's name, today's date, at the Prosper, all ages. Rudy was overtaken by a small coat hanger figure Moving at a shambling run, bowl-cut bangs left a stringy fringe across a Vaseline-shiny forehead. His glasses were perfectly round and too large. He wore a faded plaid flannel unbuttoned over a pristine white expat's bird and wire t-shirt. On the toes of his sneakers, he'd drawn with gold marker, cat ears and whiskers. Rudy! Hey, you're Rudy from the expats. Holy shit, I'm on my way to the show right now. Rough Magic is the best thing I've heard all year. I mean, definitely in my top 10. Oh yeah, of course, man, you're welcome. I mean, you guessed that from the shirt. Yeah, I'm that guy. Do you mind if I walk with you? I mean, I guess we're going to the same place. Hey, I just want to say, and I'm not just saying this to you, but I love those two songs you sang. I mean, no, really, I love Seb, obviously. His songs get me so pumped up. And I just want to yell them and put them on a sticker and stick the sticker on my shirt and stick the shirt on like a flag and wave it around while I'm yelling. But yours are like, I can feel them, but I don't know if I could say what they're about, you know? I like that. Are you going to do a record? I mean, I'd be interested. I'd buy it. Hey, I got a 4-track at my mom's. I got it at Goodwill. You could record some stuff there if you want. Holy shit, that'd be amazing. Oh, right, Ryan Orland, 15. Yeah, I know. Well, tonight's all ages, so it's cool. Ryan paused and the back of his neck turned bright red. Hey, can I give you something? Yeah, of course, man, said Rudy. The unfamiliar adulation made him magnanimous. I don't know if you're interested. I mean, I'm sure you're not interested. He pulled the cassette from his canvas army surplus shoulder bag. The sleeve was hand-drawn and photocopied, roughly trimmed to fit the case. Antonio Records, yeah, that's just me. When I was a kid, that's what I wanted my mom to name my baby brother, but I never got one and I never had a dog. So I don't know, it's stupid. I hope you like it. Rudy turned the tape over in his hand, looked at the back, looked at the spine, looked at the blush that had spread to the kid's ears. His guileless admiration was both flattering and hard not to condescend to just a little bit. Do you want to play a couple songs tonight? Rudy said impulsively. What? Before Culvert, you could get up for like 15 minutes. Holy shit, that would be amazing. Are you serious? Why not? I don't have my guitar with me, so go get it. I'll talk to the sound guy. You can plug into Jules's amp. Holy crap. Okay, I got to run home. Thank you so much. I can't believe this. The kid turned and ran, the flat soles of his sneakers slapping against the asphalt, the tail of his flannel flapping behind him. His bag slung too low buffeted his thigh, until without stopping, he reached down and tucked it up under his arm. Rudy arrived, he thought, first. The Prosper was the middle unit of a three storefront brick building. It had a yellow marquee illuminated by hanging white lily of the valley lights. A short blackboard tented on the sidewalk out front until a gust of wind folded it smacking to the ground. Rudy flicked it back open, stood it up. Green Party benefit, it read in pink chalk. The expats. In smaller blue letters below. Culvert, Atlanta. Smaller still, yellow across the bottom. 10 p.m. doors, 5 p.m. $5 suggested donation. The two front windows and swinging door were nearly obscured by black and white flyers and neon beer logos. The neighbors were business hours, nail salon, and tattoo parlor. So when the Prosper slipped imperceptibly from acoustic singer-songwriter Thursdays to bands on weekends to live music 6 nights a week, complaints were minimal. After the coffee shop closed around 7, the tables and chairs moved to a back room, exposing the gritty tiled floor left over from its original incarnation as a pizza parlor. At the back of the main room was a short stage raised a foot above the floor and covered with stains, duct taped, and stapled down carpet. The ceiling trim enlivened by a single string of neon rope. A lumpy ceramic soap dish with a hobbyist glaze sat on a ledge behind a skeletal drum kit. Over it, a handwritten sign encouraged, take a pic, leave a pic, smiley face. Side room lined with vinyl booths served as an ad hoc arena for merchandising, music escaping, bag stashing, liquor sneaking, scene beefing, score settling, peacocking, and order pecking. In the back of the room was a booth the expats had claimed as their receiving area. Cal, the manager of the Prosper, left a few bottles of wine and gave them tacit permission to augment that at their discretion. Jules was already there, alone, his guitar stretched out atop its case, awaiting fresh strings. He was shuffling a little dance and singing to himself, like cheerleaders' refrain. I feel worse when I don't drink. What's that called? What's that called? He chuckled to himself and took a sip from his cup, already fibrous with white crumple marks. He reached his chorus. Red wine, white wine, any kind of wine. He sucked back the dregs and raised his hands in solitary triumph. A stray drop wriggled past the lip of the cup, landed on the shoulder of his yellow Oxford shirt, and wicked outward. Shitting fuck. Hey, Jules, said Rudy, what's good? Jules twitched left. Oh, hey, Ruge, just ruining another shirt before I even get on stage. Outdamned spot, huh? The human stain. They usually come out in the end. If not, fuck it, there's always other shirts. Why weren't you at the space for loadout? Wanted to walk. Bass players load the van, man, that's the rule, everybody knows that. Rudy laughed. Oh, hey, Jules, there's a kid who's gonna play a few songs first of 3. I told him he could use your amp, hope that's cool. Shrug. I guess so. How much damage can one guy do? Hey, you scumbags, Seb announced from the door. Van's out back, come grab your shit. Can't park there, said Jules. Think globally, act locally, said Seb. All I ever wanted from anarchy was to park anywhere and drink in public.
Thank you. Awesome. So, yeah, a less cynical moment in the book.
Yes, one of the few.
For a deep descent into darkness. So, I guess the first thing I wanted to ask is, like, I've known a lot of writers who fantasize about being musicians, myself maybe being one of them, but I feel like I've known less. I didn't know musicians sort of also wanted to be writers. So I guess my question is, like, why you decided to when you already had this wonderful career as a musician, why you would undertake the sort of thankless and labor-intensive project of writing a novel.
Right. Well, I had sort of worked up to it. I've been, publishing little bits of things here and there and keeping tour diaries as people do. And in the songs I was writing, I had sort of moved from being more interested in the music than the words to being more interested in the words than the music. And eventually, in those sorts of situations, the words that you want to put next to each other start to overflow the boundaries of the bar lines, and you get a little more room on a piece of paper. And so I don't know, it seemed like at a certain point that the next reasonable challenge to myself in that realm was to try to write a book length thing, which turned out to be The Humorless Ladies, which was the first book. And then that, it didn't set the world on fire, but it did well enough that it seemed like the door was open if I wanted to write another one.
It didn't send you into complete sort of despair?
I mean, my expectations for it were zero, essentially, aside from the sort of hustle of, like, I made this thing and I want to get it out in the world. And it did, it did. I was expecting that I would give it to these two, punk kids who had put out this one anthology that I had an essay in, and they would put it out and no one, would ever read it. And then my wife convinced me to at least try to send it out, to be a slightly more ambitious. And I'm glad that she did. Because that's what, that's how I ended up here. But then after that, it seemed like that, I had, at every step, it's sort of been like, what's the next challenge, right? Like I had sort of made my name in bands, and then what's the next challenge? Well, can I walk into a room full of people by myself and come and sort of make it worth their while to pay attention to me? And sort of, so those were the solo records and the solo touring. And then, so okay, I've proven to myself I can write a book of nonfiction. What's the next logical steps? Like, let me see if I can write a longer piece of fiction than I had done before.
Sure. Did it feel, I mean, it must have felt very different though, writing fiction. It's interesting because, I mean, it's a music book. It's about a musician. It's about a touring musician. You've obviously been a touring musician for a really long time. And yet it's not, like autofiction, the guy's a guitar player. He's not a keyboard player. It's clearly, not you. I wonder.
I'm glad you think so. Many of the people I've spoken to about the book take a different approach.
Well, I guess I wonder about, it's obviously drawing from your experiences, in that like the scene you just described in this basement could not have been written by someone who hadn't been in those kinds of rooms. And yet, I don't think the character is you. I mean, the character doesn't strike me as being you, but I wonder if there's something freeing about sort of writing writing about your own experiences, but sort of through the lens of fiction, in the way that you can sort of, I don't know, like what can you do that you couldn't do in, you know, in memoir or in the nonfiction form?
Yeah, I mean,
Like why is this the vehicle for that story, you know?
you can shape the story to fit the themes that you want to write about, right? Like you're not tied to what actually happened and what you wrote down of what people said, and particularly, you know, you're not tied to the things you yourself might do. You know, I think Rudy is much far, you know, Rudy is sort of a cautionary tale for me of like where I might have ended up 15 years down the line if I hadn't have gone down a different road. I mean, you're always picking, I have to assume most fiction writers are always, it's like a Frankenstein project. You pick out someone's like eyelashes and someone else's, you know, earlobe and, you know, someone's legs, and then you sort of put the cables to it and it gets up and starts walking around. And if somebody's like, oh, isn't that, you know, Aunt Mary's ear? It's like, well, yeah, it used to be, but now it belongs to this creature. I mean, I had a similar question for you about writing a novel, like the technical challenge of writing a novel set in the very near future, right? The horizon for that is always approaching. So like, did that add to the normal excruciating pressure of writing, or is it just sort of subsumed into the general anxiety?
It didn't seem stressful at first, because originally I made that choice as a way to make things easier for myself, because when I first started working on this novel, which was like 2000, like a decade ago, I guess, I wanted to write a novel set around the 2008 Wall Street crash, and was trying to research that, and in doing that research and starting writing the novel, realized I didn't really want to write what, you know, what essentially would have to have been a historical novel, in part because my understanding of those events, like no matter how many incredibly long books about finance I read, was going to be pretty limited. And also because there was a lot of really good nonfiction written about those events. And I just sort of couldn't quite figure out, I don't know, how to make that into a novel, or how to make it interesting for me, or how to sort of what I could add to that. And also, as you said, you know, I didn't want to sort of be beholden to actual history and to what things that really happened, because then it was sort of limiting in that way. And so I had the bright idea to set the book in the future, in which I could just make up my own financial crash, and sort of simplify it in a way that would be somewhat more understandable to me. And then, of course, you know, so I was like halfway through writing a book and Trump got elected, and it changed everything, because suddenly the future that I had imagined was just not nearly dystopic enough. My dystopia was not dystopic enough. And it became very difficult to, like, you know, imagine what the future was going to look like in 2016, or like, you know, what was even the next day going to look like. So I had to actually do a lot of rewriting in that year, in like 2016, 2017, kind of totally reimagine certain aspects of the book.
It did strike me as a book that seemed like it was carved out of a lot of raw material.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's interesting. I mean, the reason I asked you about sort of writing the character who's a musician but is not, like, this was a challenge for me, because I've really never been a Wall Street banker, and you know, my knowledge of it is limited. But in a certain way, I found that having the character, you know, be this guy who sort of, he became almost like a hyperbolic version of like everything about myself that I feel guilty about, or that I, you know, he sort of came to represent my own anxieties about, you know, my complicity in like the global class system, and you know, late capitalism, and like all this stuff. And he sort of like owned that in a way that I myself, I don't think would ever do in writing a character who was maybe closer to myself or something. I was able to kind of like explore, I guess. Yeah, it's like I sometimes feel like maybe I'm in my own complicity, I'm like as problematic as a Wall Street trader.
Uh-huh. One of those, speaking of getting into different voices, one of the really effective climaxes of the book, without giving too much away, is this guy's Greg's pitch speech for this suit, this technology, which, you know, I can sort of see.
You don't have to give it away, but you can confirm that I essentially invented the metaverse.
Yeah, totally. The world is now catching up to your book. You know, you obviously don't agree with what Greg is pitching, but it managed to be sort of legitimately persuasive. Like, you can get caught up in his speech. I was curious about getting into that sort of pitchman voice.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't work on Wall Street. So half the book is this guy Michael's perspective, and he's this Wall Street trader, and the other half is from the perspective of his wife, Wendy, who works in like digital marketing and sort of branded content, or what a kind of hybrid of marketing and editorial and content, about all sorts of things. And that is something that I did do for a little while after I finished graduate school. I essentially worked at a company that, you know, we would get hired to write editorial content or create editorial content for brands. So like one of my first jobs was blogging for Ralph Lauren, writing a blog for the Ralph Lauren website, where I'd write about books and movies, but like in such a way that would highlight their clothes, which was really sort of absurd. And you know, at the time it just seemed kind of funny, and you know, it was pretty well paying. But certainly, so I was in a lot of these very strange kinds of pitch meetings where, like, you know, in a meeting with a bunch of ad execs trying to pitch like you know, Smirnoff vodka on like creating their own like lifestyle TV channel or something, things like that. And so, you know, just, I guess, like, I only worked there really for a couple of years, but just taking in the way these people talk, and the way the people in this world talk, and sort of the way they're just so full of shit, so confidently and like articulately full of shit, was something I really, I guess, stuck with me, and that I wanted to try to capture. So I'm glad that was effective.
Yeah, I mean, there's also something about the enjoyment of like trying to write to a particular genre, right? Like one of the things that was the most fun for me in this one was writing that the fake pitchfork review.
I was gonna like haywire, is that what you
haystack
haystack
yeah, just like the jargon that a particular genre requires, you know, the way of the attitude towards the product the thing requires, you know, similar sort of thing that you're talking about.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, actually, because I felt like, first of all, it just seemed really fun to be able to kind of do all that, and like the band names, and even sort of like digging into the lyrics. Yeah. I wondered about the challenge of like wanting to sort of satirize those things, but also not sort of wanting to push it too far that it became like silly or you know, like it's, the book still feels it's sort of very much a realist novel, and you know, it's not like a Mark Lehner novel or something where it's sort of everything's like hyperbolized to the millionth degree, and yet it does feel like that you managed to get in like these little jabs throughout, or these little kind of, you know, there's this very kind of slight satire. So
well, that's one of the joys of writing a book like this, right? Like you want it to feel real. You want people to read who have lived in this world to feel like you captured it. At the same time, I did make a point of not having any overlap with the actual music world that I live in, right? Like, so there's no real names of musicians. There's no real names of venues. You know, it's a parallel universe that's
right.
Cars.
It's like one of those TV shows where it's like everything's the same, but there's a different president.
Yeah, and it's not Diet Coke. It's something else that's red and white.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was thinking about that choice. Like, I feel like there's sort of two ways to go. I want to ask you about rock novels and music novels, and like if there are any you like or were thinking about when you're writing it, because I feel like that's the choice, that there's sort of that choice, which is like Great Jones Street or something, right? Where it's like a world in which the Beatles don't exist, but
Yeah.
this guy who Don DeLillo has invented does, or something. But
who's not Bob Dylan, but he's not a million miles. He's like the alternate universe Bob Dylan. Yeah.
Right. Or like, or even like my friend Teddy Wayne's novel about a kid who's like but isn't Justin Bieber, but like pretty much love song of Johnny Valentine. But then there's like the other direction, which I think is like sort of riskier or weirder. Like have you ever read Camden Joy's novels?
Mm-mm.
He's this guy. Do you know who he is? He was this guy who was like a music journalist in the 90s, and sort of he got semi-famous for like he would write these essays about pavement and put them on huge posters and handwrite them and poster them around the Lower East Side. He like became sort of this cult figure. He wrote these two amazing novels. One is really amazing, and the other one is sort of terrible, I think, in part for, so the first one is this book, The Last Rock Star Book, and the book is about a journalist who gets assigned to write a biography of Liz Phair, and he doesn't know who Liz Phair is. And in the writing of the book and the researching of Liz Phair, becomes convinced that Liz Phair is actually his ex-girlfriend, who's like changed her name to Liz Phair and then made this album about their relationship, and he decides he's going to murder her. It's like the craziest fucking book, but like amazing. It's just like so. It
sounds incredible. I've never heard this name before.
It's actually an amazing book. It's just like so nuts, and like it works because even though it's like Liz Phair, it's such a departure from reality. Like there's none of sort of real whoever Liz Phair actually is. It just like becomes this guy's total sort of like mad fantasy. Then he wrote this other book. I guess he went on tour with Cracker, the band, as a journalist, or they thought as a journalist, and he ended up writing this novel in which Camden Joy, replaces the drummer from Cracker with himself, but everyone else is the same. Everyone else is the actual names, and except he's the drummer, and it's like a coming out story about him being the drummer from Cracker and like coming out as gay, and the bandmates not accepting it. And it's, I don't know, it doesn't quite land in the same way. And I think Cracker then sued him, and like it was a whole.
I was gonna say, how did they respond to that? That sounds wild.
Not happy, yeah. Like sort of worth reading just for how wacky it is.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the risk.
That's the risk. I mean, books about rock. There's not. My opinion is the batting average on novels about rock is not as high as maybe it ought to be, because I feel like people reach for the most obvious signifiers of rockness. So you get a lot of novels about bands in the late 60s and 70s, and the House of Rock has many mansions. So like I picked up it was Nell Zink's last one, Doxology.
Oh yeah.
There's this huge subplot about indie rock in Hoboken. It's like, yeah, great. That's a totally that's a world that one could set a novel in.
Right.
Why is she the only one who's done that?
Or like Garden State, I guess, the Rick Moody novel, isn't that also about it? It's like also, I think, about indie rock in Hoboken, but
that makes sense. He was sort
at
of
least
in
in somewhere in Jersey.
Or just remember. There's I'm trying to think. The one I have, the one that keeps jumping to mind is the counterexample, which is Utopia Avenue, that came out a year or two ago.
I never read that.
It's who I think is like a pretty good writer generally, but this is like that example of, I'm going to set my rock novel and swing in London, and Jimmy Page and David Bowie and John Lennon are all going to have walk-ons, and they're going to be referred to by their full name.
Right.
And it's just like, it's like walking into a biopic.
It's like one of those movies that's like set in Paris in the 20s. Like, I'm Ernest Hemingway. Hi, my name is Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah, totally.
Don't you like alcohol? I do like alcohol.
Hey, David Bowie, you're going to be a star, man. Man, that's got a ring to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, I don't know where I'm going. Like, we can name off other books, rock books. I mean, there's some cool experiments. There's the Christopher Sorrentino has one
I was
called
going to mention
Sound on
Sound on
Sound.
Sound. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, like, I don't think it entirely works, but it's a really cool idea.
Totally.
You know, for the handful of people who are here, he sets it up as if it's a recording session where it's like the first chapter is setting down the rhythm track, and then there's a chapter of, you know, I forget, there's a guitar solo chapter that's just this long extended riff. It's interesting.
Yeah, it goes for something. One thing I was thinking about your book, I was thinking about this maybe because I actually said it in my blurb that you, quote, reinvented the road novel. Did you think of it as a road novel when you were writing it? And to me, it feels very much, you know, that's the other sort of genre that I kind of can place it in. And I think, you know, what I really liked about it was that the road novel, to me, it's like there's such sort of like romanticism, and this book was just like totally devoid of that kind of. And I was thinking about how, like, you know, it's like the road novel is like usually young men, and it's like young men with all this energy, like setting out to find themselves. And this book is like it's like a dude who's exhausted.
Yeah,
it's like the end of, it's sort of the end of the road novel. I don't know. I guess I was just wondering if how you thought about that, and also how you thought about, like, you know, what are sort of the obvious tropes of the road novel and how you might like circumvent them or.
I mean, I think I did think of it as a road novel. I think of it as the tropes of the road novel are the ones you just.
I partly ask because I'm trying to write a road novel.
You know, I've taught a few classes on, you know, reading and writing about music, and I like to have a class on what I think is bad music writing, and I always use some of those jazz sections from On the Road, for example, of just like that, like wide-eyed, naive romanticism, slightly objectifying romanticism. The one that I had in mind, especially in the back half of the book, is Lolita, of course, where they're driving in the opposite direction.
I thought of that as well. Yeah.
You know, obviously this is a chaste version of that that's going in a very different direction.
Right.
But that's sort of like
with his niece, right?
With his niece, yeah. But he's, you know, he's read the book, so he's certainly he's aware of it.
Right. There's a part where he's sort of like aware that other people might be thinking that he's some not so appropriate.
Yeah, but that sort of delight in the detritus of the American roadside, you know, that I had in mind. And it's what, you know, it is the through line between this book and the previous book. They're both road books. The first one was explicitly a travel book, and this one is, you know, I mean, the cover leans into it, right?
Right. Yeah.
Do you have a similar sort of linkage in your mind between Flat Screen and this, or do you think of them as totally different projects?
Pretty different. I mean, I think there's a linkage in the sense that I almost feel like I wrote this as a response to sort of like what I imagined were like the problems or the flaws or like that what I imagined other people might like criticize about Flat Screen, or in part, or like and partly like in the sense that I think,
can you expand on that? I'm curious what you mean.
So Flat Screen, you know, it's a novel about one guy, and it's about this guy who's 20 and he lives in his mother's basement, and it's sort of like his worldview is very small, and you know, the idea of the book is that he's everything he knows essentially he's learned from TV and movies, and because of that he sort of has a lot of information, but he doesn't really understand like relationships or how to communicate with people, and so his world is very small, and I felt like I guess and the book is almost, you know, meant to be sort of purposely claustrophobic, but I worried, of course, that it just reads as claustrophobic, and that, you know, it's just like about this rich kid who lives in his mother's basement, and so I felt like I wanted to sort of be more expansive and write a book that made room for other people's perspectives, beyond just sort of one white dude or something, and just beyond one character really. But and so sort of I you know, and I'd been reading like those big Bolaño novels, and I sort of like, oh, I want to write a book, you know, that has a ton of characters and that sort of paints a much larger picture. And so that felt like that was the challenge. I mean, in a similar way, you were talking about like, what's the next challenge? For me, it was like, okay, I think I can write a book that's just like first person, one guy talking. Like, let's see if I can write a book with like 2 narrators and then 10 third person. I don't know. I don't know that I succeeded necessarily, but you know, it was a lot of trial and error. But I also think in part, I mean, I guess what I mean when I say sort of like, I think in part in my mind when I was writing Flat Screen, you know, I sort of had these very grandiose ideas about what it was about, and that this was like this book about, you know, post 9/11 America and like blah blah blah. And then when the book came out, it was sort of, everyone was like, oh, this is this funny stoner comedy. And I was like, no, but it's so much more than that. But then, you know, but maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Maybe it was just a stoner comedy. But so I think with this book, I was like, they're never gonna call this one just a stoner like I'm gonna make it very clear that it has big ideas and there's, you know, gonna be a murder and there's gonna be politics and blah blah blah. And so sort of in that sense, it felt like a response somehow to that.
Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely feels like a bigger world. Like we haven't really talked about the form, and it's not just this Michael and Wendy. It, you know, it opens up and cycles through a bunch of other characters. It comes back to Michael and Wendy from different. It requires you know, a little more readerly attention to orient yourself at the beginning of each chapter. The parenthetical chapter.
Oh yeah.
Wendy helpfully explains that there's a reference to the lighthouse there, which yeah. I wanted to ask you about because I couldn't quite make the connection between your chapter and this business about characters' deaths being announced in passing.
Yeah, so there's a part where basically there's a chapter that itself is in parentheses, which is sort of a flashback to these two. The book is about sort of the end of these characters' marriage, and this is this one section to this flashback to an early moment in their relationship, but it also takes place right after 9/11. And it's sort of, so I guess like one of the big themes of the book that I was trying to explore is like the relationship between individuals and world historical events, and like the role of individuals in world historical events, and also like the ways that these events affect individual lives. And thinking very much about this idea of like, you know, as the central metaphor of the derivatives trader, who's like a person who's making, you know, trading these bundles of mortgages without, you know, hundreds upon hundreds of mortgages like packaged together and just sort of like flinging them left and right, and like they're baseball cards being traded. And then each of these mortgages is like someone's mortgage, and that is, you know, that affects their entire life and their whole family's life and everything. So, you know, I guess into the lighthouse, there's this thing where these characters die and it's not explored, and it's just kind of marked in parentheses. And so the question is sort of like, so the question Wendy's teacher asked her is like, when is death, you know, when is death relevant? I think she says, and like, when is it just death? And Wendy says it's like relevant to the people who are dying. And so, yeah. You know, I guess it's sort of part of this bigger question about, you know, how things that happen off screen, when things happen off screen to other people, like, do they happen or they do happen, but how do we, you know, how do we relate to them, and how do our choices sort of factor into those things? So I think it's sort of, I don't know, it's not like a one-to-one
No, I totally get
But
it now.
yeah,
And I have a follow-up to that I want to add,
yeah.
but I guess I should say before we get too short on time, that if anyone has any questions they want to throw in the chat, we can address those. Otherwise, I can keep asking Adam questions infinitely.
I have a few more.
Yeah. What you're saying about the anonymity brings me to the other question about Michael is this kind of basic finance bro, but he has these intellectual pretensions, specifically to write this book about Eminem, which is obviously a really funny detail, and he does have a little bit of self-awareness about the ridiculousness of it. But I did think he, and by extension you, were onto something about describing him as you call him the first true artist. I think it was something like the anonymous id unleashed by the internet, and by analogy, the anonymity of the securitized commodity trading, and then the sort of infinite subjectivity of social media. I am whatever you say I am. I just wanted to ask you about how long, about toying with these ideas about Eminem as a signifier.
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about them for a long time, and like at one point I think I was like, oh, maybe I should like try and pitch a 33 1/3 book about Eminem. And then I found out that those, you don't really get paid for those, I don't think.
Right.
It's like a lot of work. But I mean, the real answer is like, yeah, no, I mean, I think I've thought a lot about that stuff, and I do sort of like buy Michael's argument, or I, or at least something I've thought. But I think the nice thing about a novel, and like, kind of having a novel or having a character who's able to sort of be a mouthpiece for ideas in this way, is like, you can offer them with a grain of salt a little bit. You don't quite need to
plausible deniability.
Yeah, you don't.
That's
you
not
don't
me.
Need, or you can sort of like offer them within a dialectical, where it's like one character is presenting, a worldview or an idea, and the other characters or the book itself can kind of push against those ideas, or can, call them into question. And so I like that in the sense that, yeah, it puts less pressure on the ideas themselves. They're allowed to just sort of like exist without necessarily having to like, be like an airtight case. Or
and you can have your worst impulses and your best impulses argue with each other.
Yeah,
Form.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other one,
I mean, I think in a similar way, it's similar, to the characters in your book, and like, Rudy, who at this point is sort of has become quite cynical about the music industry, and then like, or even like in that scene you read, and then Ryan, who's like, the young sort of earnest, excited guy with his heart on his sleeve, and like you don't necessarily, the book doesn't necessarily have to like take a stance about those things.
And everybody passes through these stages.
Yeah.
You can have people express different, I can put some of my like uncharitable new father feelings in Jules's mouth, and in his wife's mouth, the ways in which I understand, that the ridiculousness and the selfishness of those feelings, and yeah, it's absolutely.
And then it allows you to sort of explore your worst selves in like a safe environment where it's not actually.
Somebody that I studied with said, everyone's always going to associate you with your protagonist, so put your worst thoughts in a secondary character.
Do you feel like you did that?
I don't know. I put some of my worst thoughts in the protagonist too.
Me too.
Yeah, so that's another one of the nice things about fiction, is you can be such a jerk because it's fiction. It's not, you don't have to own it in the same way.
I guess we don't have time, but I was going to ask you about unlikable characters and what.
Yeah.
But,
do we have time?
I mean,
those are my favorite books to read. In some ways, because it's so cathartic, all the stuff that you don't get to say, that you occasionally think in your worst moments. There's a real catharsis in hearing someone else saying it. I think there's always going to be an appeal in transgression, and we're in a world right now where transgression is has been cordoned off. And I worry about that sometimes, that if that percentage of people who have transgressive impulses that they want to indulge, if the only place for them is going to be on the political right, then you're seeding the field of the counterculture,
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I've thought a lot about that. So
I mean, that's like someone like Welbeck is a perfect example.
Sure, yeah.
Because he doesn't care how he's perceived politically, he has this field all to himself.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I love Welbeck.
Yeah,
Love that guy.
Me too.
Hey,
Sam.
If you're French, you can also just do whatever.
Yes, right. It does not.
Hey guys. I'm just cracking up back here listening to y'all. Oh man, thank you so much to both of you. This has been a really fun conversation to listen to, and to have I mean, I won't name names, but like to have some of my own thoughts about music writing and some sort of political novels of recent years sort of vindicated to a certain extent by you. So thank you. Hey, what's next for each of you guys? Are you working on new projects?
I'm 9 months and counting late on a book that I was supposed to have delivered back in May for University of Texas Press for their American Music series, about the working and creative lives of middle-class musicians, which I did too much research for, and now I'm sort of trying to carve back into a book.
Sounds great.
I hope so.
Oh, I'll read it. I have a 3-week-old at home, 3-week-old newborn. So it's the main thing I've been doing. As I said, I was working on a new novel that is sort of a road novel. And I was like trying to finish it before the baby was born. And I got a little stuck. I don't know. I think I was going too quickly, and I've now taken a little break from it, and I'm gonna come back in a couple months or so, see if it's salvageable or if I should just abandon and try something else. So we'll see.
Awesome. Well, if anyone from U Texas Press is out there listening live, I want a galley of that, and definitely going to want to. I'm a sucker for a good road novel, Adam. So I hope you keep going with it, because I definitely would love to see it.
I probably will.
Yeah. And congratulations on your newborn as well. Thank you to everyone out there watching tonight. And those of you catching us live, I hope you'll consider picking up both of these books. The new books are Someone Should Pay for Your Pain, Franz Nicolay, out now from Gibson House Press. There's a link in the chat to pick this one up. And the new paperback of Sensation Machines by Adam Wilson. Again, also available through the Norwich Bookstore. You can order this. There's a link in the chat. We'll send you a copy no matter where in the country you might happen to be. And if you're here in New England, we hope you'll brave the snow flurries and come see us. We would definitely love to see you. Franz, your day job brings you to the Brooklyn Bowl week after next, right? I think there are tickets still available for that if anybody wants to see Franz playing music in the New York area. Holdsteady.net. I think there are a couple of those shows are still have some limited availability, so don't sleep on it. And thank you both for joining us this evening. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And to everyone out there tonight watching, thank you so much for joining us. Do good work, be safe, read good books, and we will see you next time. Many thanks to Adam Wilson, Franz Nicolay. Have a great night, everybody.
Thanks.